He said he wants to earn every dollar, Stephen A. What should we consider success for him?
A Super Bowl championship within the next 3 years, 3 to 4 years. That's what I'm looking at. That's what I'm looking at. That's how I feel.
I get it.
Ladies and gentlemen, the man just signed for $100 million guaranteed. According to my sources, there are incentives within that contract that pumps it up to $120 million. That's more than any coach is getting paid in the NFL. It's more than any player is getting paid in the NFL. And it's 10 years after, after a 10-year absence that you've coached. And the last 6 years prior to you coaching, you were 45 and 51 with only 2 playoff appearances, and you lost both games. I'm sorry, I have expectations. Now, in fairness to Jon Gruden, let me say this. I think that he was incredibly honest in that interview. I believed every word that he said that we just showed in terms of what he felt he owed to Raider Nation, recognizing that they're about to move to Vegas, wanting to come back before they move to Las Vegas, to re-ingratiate yourself with that Oakland crowd, because to some degree they raised them. Because the Oakland Raiders, Raider Nation is one of the greatest fan bases in all of sports. Let's just call it what it is and give them their props. And they deserve so much better than what they have received. And I love the fact that he's accepting this challenge, and I completely believe him, and I wish him nothing but the best. He was always good to me when he was here working at ESPN, and I'm rooting for him. But we got to call it like we see it. They had Derek Carr last year, Max. Do you know that their leading receiver was Jared Cook? 688 yards. Amari Cooper had less, 680. Michael Crabtree had less, 618. Beast Mode had a relatively decent season, but he didn't rush for 1,000 yards. Derek Carr was somewhat of a disappointment. Let's just call it what it is. I believe in him. I think he can play. But he was somewhat of a disappointment. So they've got something to prove because they have the personnel. But if they didn't have the personnel, I wouldn't be saying this. Khalil Mack on the defensive side of the ball, you're going to need some help. But offensively, they've got the requisite weapons, and now you've got the coach, and you clearly have leadership because we know that Jon Gruden can lead. Looking at the personnel, I see no reason. You're going to sign for $100 million. To me, in the next 4 years, a Super Bowl championship is something that I should be able to expect from you.
First, let's establish what well, first of all, you're wrong. I mean, obviously that would be success, but that's not the only way to measure it. That's not the baseline for success. First, let's see what success is in the NFL. I think it's fair. I think it's fair to say that success for a successful head coach in the NFL is a guy who usually has a winning record, let's say half the time makes the playoffs, and occasionally advances, sometimes actually wins a playoff game or two. That's a successful head coach. If you're doing that, you're a success. However, you're right about this. He's the highest paid guy. The standards are higher for Jon Gruden. Therefore, let's say that he almost always has to have a winning record. He usually makes the playoffs, and when he does make the playoffs, he usually advances. Now let me be more specific about the next 3 years. You said 3 to 4 years, he needs to win a Super Bowl. The problem with that is best team doesn't always win. Super Bowl wins usually also include luck. So to penalize or give credit to a head coach for luck one way or another is not fair. Belichick's different. Belichick wins so often that it's more than just luck. He's in his own category. No one else is in Belichick's category. I'm talking about for everybody else. So what would that be for Gruden? I'd say in the next 3 seasons, within that time, he needs to make the playoffs with the bye. Got to win the division, so you're not playing in the first round, and win a playoff game. In other words, sometime in the next 3 or 4 years, you got to be in the AFC Championship game. I think that's fair. I think that would be a good measure of success. To say in addition to that, you also have to get a little lucky, have things go your way, and win a Super Bowl is a lot. Look, the Raiders do have a really good offensive line. They have recently. They have Khalil Mack, who up front is amazing, as good as anyone in the NFL. You're right, Carr and Cooper have regressed. That'll be Gruden's job to make sure that they progress and they end the regression. And they got to get a back end of the defense. They have to do that through the draft, free agency,
and
however they do
back.
that. Sure, but running backs, if your offensive line is good, you can find a competent running game. They really have to focus on the secondary. So he gets there next year. He's doing some things. Sometimes you got to take a step back to take 2 forward. May or may not make the playoffs next year. Year after that, got to make the playoffs, and the year after that, you got to advance in the playoffs. That would be a success for Jon Gruden.